Friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Russia. We received very interesting updates from this area. Saboteurs were plotting an assassination attempt on Sergei Shoigu, Moscowski Komsomolets reports. Recently, the media reported the exposure of a sabotage group that was planning to assassinate a high-ranking Russian official. The name was not disclosed, as Moscowski Komsomolets has learned. The assassination attempt was being planned against Secretary of the Russian Security Council Sergei Kuzhevatovich Shoigu, the publication writes. I would like to point to your attention that he's a very important person in the Russian authorities, and this is the first thing. And the second thing, I would like to remind you that Sergei Shoigu was in charge of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation when the special military operation started. As of the beginning of the 18th of November of 2025, it wasn't revealed who exactly was planning the assassination attempt, but most likely we're talking about Ukrainian special forces. And furthermore, when talking about Ukraine, there are several important things that we need to keep in our mind. First of all, I would like to point to attention. I would like to remind you that several days ago, Zelensky held a meeting with the head of intelligence service of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, and Zelensky instructed Kirill Budanov to carry out some measures in the interests of Ukraine. So I'm not saying that Zelensky instructed Kirill Budanov to carry out assassination attempt on the territory of the Russian Federation, but everything is possible. So that is why I would like to point to attention that this important meeting took place on the 12th of November of 2025, so basically almost a week ago. Another important thing that when talking about different countries, of course, Russia, we believe, had dozens or hundreds of possibilities to attack probably authorities, high-ranking authorities of Ukraine. But since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians hasn't carried out even a single attempt to do this. And Ukrainians or somebody attacked Moscow, somebody attacked Shoigu, the former Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and the current Secretary of the Russian Security Council, which means that Russia has the right to mirror this action, which means that the Russians can do the same against a person on the territory of Ukraine who has a similar position in Ukraine authority. So, and now this is the most interesting point and the most interesting thing, because if we analyze who exactly has this position in the Ukraine authorities, then we will come to this person. This is Rustam Umerov. He is a former Minister of Defense of Ukraine, and now he is the National Security and Defense Council. So he is the same in Ukraine as Shoigu on the territory of the Russian Federation. And now the most important thing I would like to point and remind you that several days ago, this person, Rustam Umerov, left Ukraine. First, he left to Israel, he left to Turkey, where he supposed to begin preparation to start negotiations with Russians on the prisoner exchange process. And later, he left Turkey and went to Qatar. And today we got report that he is not going to return back to Ukraine. The National Security and Defense Council Secretary who fled Ukraine refused to return to the country. Umerov personally informed Zelensky of his decision, according to media reports. Umerov previously stated that he had gone to Turkey to negotiate a prisoner exchange. So this is a very interesting situation because lots of sources blamed Umerov as he was a part of huge corruption scandal across Ukraine, and that he was also involved in different corruption schemes, according to with people who are inside of the inner circle of Zelensky. But with this assassination attempt that took place on the territory of Moscow, we see that currently there is a completely different picture. We believe that Rustam Umerov left the territory of Ukraine when he realized that Russia has the right to mirror assassination attempt on their Secretary of Defense and Security, and to do the same situation in the territory of Ukraine. So basically, he left Ukraine first in the direction of Turkey with the purpose to get some security guarantees. Then he went to Qatar, where he was trying to get additional security guarantees, but most likely Qatar has some connections with the Russian Federation, and if he returns back to the territory of Ukraine, most likely he will get these security guarantees from the Russian side that they will not touch him and they will not do anything with him. him. Anyway, this is a very interesting situation, and we'll see what is going to be next, because obviously we need to understand this clearly, that if Zelensky made something or had any connections with this, let's say, assassination attempt, or Kirill Budanov, the Secret Service of Ukraine, any connections with this assassination attempt on the territory of the Russian Federation, then when they were planning this operation, most likely they knew that what the consequences that Ukraine and authorities in Ukraine would face after successful ending of this possible assassination. Anyway, the situation, as you can see, is very interesting. Let's wait and see what is going to be next. But obviously, it is very interesting whether the National Security and Defense Council Secretary Umerov is going to return back to Ukraine. If he returns, then most likely he receives the guarantees from the Russian side.
Med baggrundsafspillingen på YouTube Music-appen kan du afspille officielle sange og live-optagelser i baggrunden.
Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact. And first, let's talk about the Odessa region. During the previous 48-72 hours, the Russians carried out massive missile attack across and drone attack across the Odessa region. And as a result of those attacks, the Russians managed to damage the gas facilities and gas infrastructure of Ukraine. In this video, we can see a vessel that was transporting LNG that most likely was damaged as a result of Russian attack, and the sources are saying that Ukrainians were forced to burn the gas on the board of the vessel. So lots of explosions and lots of attacks took place in this area, and the sources are saying that the Ukrainian authorities and rescue services still haven't managed to stabilize the situation. Very interesting video and satellite picture we received from the settlement of Nikolaev. According to information we have, the Ukrainians are trying to improve their defense along the bridge between, let's say, the western and the eastern banks of the river of this area. And the Ukrainians built additional defense line, which means that Ukrainians don't exclude the situation, the possibility that in the future the Russians may try to destroy the bridge with drones, with Navy drones. Now let's discuss the situation in the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 12 hours, according to pro-Russian sources, the armed forces of the Russian Federation continued their offensive operation in the direction of the settlements of Nechaevka and Radosne. We expect that in coming days, or maybe even in coming hours, maybe even today, the Russians would publish additional information about the situation on the ground, and the Russians will report about complete control over one of these settlements. Now let's discuss the situation in the city of Pokrovsk. As for this area, very interesting video is coming from the territory of the settlements of Andronovka, Kamenka and Kalinovka. In this video, we can see the consequences of Russian attack on the bridge, on the logistic bridge along M30 road with aviation and with FAP, with aviation bomb. As you can see, as a result of this attack, the bridge was completely destroyed. So which means that Ukrainians have huge problems with logistics in this area. Now they need to find other way, in different ways, how to bring additional reinforcements and reserves in the direction of Grishna and Sergeyevka. As for the city of Pokrovsk itself, and as for the Pokrovsk agglomeration, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of videos from the territory of the Mirnograd citadel. In this video, we can see how Russians were bombing positions of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the Mirnograd citadel with FAB 3000. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that there are still positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area, and we will adjust the map in Ukrainian favor because the Russians are still bombing this territory, trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back from these buildings and from this high-rise building area. Now let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Siversk, because the most important updates are coming exactly from this area. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Russian sources and pro-Ukrainian sources reported that Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense in the southern part of the city of Siversk and to capture, first of all, this company's stronghold, this biggest stronghold on the Siversk direction. Furthermore, according to information we have and according to different mappers, the Russians managed to secure completely the southern part out of the settlement and to get the street, to get the Lenina Street and Yamska Street. So this information was confirmed by different pro-Russian sources. Furthermore, we have a video that was published today by pro-Ukrainian sources. We will not watch this video due to significant number of violence and casualties, but the video shows how Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers and Russian units exactly at this point. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Russians managed to capture this stronghold and to advance even further in the northern direction. So now we see that Russians and Ukrainians are entering the active phase and the final phase of the battle for Siversk. The Russians are advancing from the south. They will try to improve their positions as much as possible. Furthermore, and the most important, the Russians have positions both on the right and on the left side of the railways that split the city in two parts, and Russians will continue offensive operation. I would like to remind you that just yesterday we received the report from the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation that Russians managed to secure the settlement of Platonovka, which means that in coming days the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the southeastern direction with the purpose to attack the city of Siversk from behind. So this will allow the Russians to cut Ukraine in cold room. We're not talking about thousands of Ukrainians, as we can see right now on the territory of the city of Mirnograd or Pokrovsk, but obviously several hundreds of the armored forces of Ukrainian soldiers could be trapped by Russians. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians resumed their offensive operation in the area of the settlements of Liman and Yampol. Now the Russians are tasked to move further in the southwestern direction to cut TO513 road physically and to establish complete control over the territory, to advance further and to capture the settlement of Dubrova. So once again, the pro-Russian sources and pro-Ukrainian sources are saying that currently the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over everything along this red line. If Russians are able to do this, then they will be able to cut this direction into several pieces, and from the settlement of Dubrova, the Russians can begin offensive operation in the western direction towards the settlements of Stara Karavan, Brusovka. Russians may try to cross the river of Seversky Donets and to answer the settlements of Stara Dubovka and Kriva and from these positions, the Russians can begin offensive operation towards the settlements of Kriva Luka, Zern and Zakitna as a part of the Siversk offensive operation, which is currently ongoing. Now let's talk about the most northern parts of Ukraine, and let's talk about the Kharkiv direction. We see that the Russians of the group of forces north are intensifying their offensive operation. We'd like to remind you that just yesterday the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Dvorechinskaya. This information was confirmed by this video, and by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and of course by the official Telegram channel of the group of forces north. As a result of clashes, the Russians secured this territory, and the Russians continued offensive operation. And yesterday we were expecting that Russians most likely would begin offensive operation or intensify their offensive in the Volchansk direction. And this is exactly what happened during the previous 12 hours. This morning, the group of forces north reported that as a result of clashes, the armored force of the Russian Federation of the group of forces north managed to establish complete control over a small village by the name of Tsegelny, which is located between the settlements of Silnelnikova and Volcha. So the Russians are entering the Kharkiv operational space, and their offensive is intensifying. Furthermore, I would like to point your attention that most likely the Russians will advance in the Kharkiv direction very fast, and most likely we're going to see the same situation as we currently can see in the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous night, the Ukrainians continue attacking positions deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation in the Volchansk direction. During the previous 12 hours, the Ukrainians attacked several malls, most likely what that Russians were using for logistic purposes. Some warehouses and ammo depots were destroyed, so which means that Ukrainians are trying to slow down the Russians and to reduce their possibilities to advance further and deeper inside of the Kharkiv region. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.